Hundreds of meters underground, a monster chainsaw carves into geological deposits of marble. The chainsaw arm rotates to change position, allowing it to make both vertical and horizontal cuts. It cuts uniform blocks of marble. A loader then extracts the blocks from the rock face. They're the exact size requested by the customer, thanks to the precision and power of the chainsaw mining machine. It takes several steel tubes of various dimensions to make a chainsaw mining machine. Using an automated saw, they cut the tubes to the correct length. This one will be used for the base structure or chassis. After assembling the tubes in the correct configuration, a worker joins them with welds. Now complete, they lower the chassis onto the chainsaw machine tracks. They bolt it to the fifth wheel coupling that will allow the machine to rotate 360 degrees. Then they bring in the framework for motors, an oil tank, and electrical components. Once it's in place, they bolt it to the chassis. The next part is a rail system for raising and lowering the chainsaw blade. The worker attaches it to the chassis using a thick pin. This pin will also act as a hinge, allowing the vertical structure to be folded down when needed. Satisfied that the machine's basic framework fits together well, they take it apart for painting. They also paint the gear motors. This one will power the carriage that moves the blade back and forth. With all the parts now painted orange, they reassemble the chainsaw machine framework. Next up is the carriage that rotates within the vertical rail to position the blade for cutting. They mount it to the front of the machine. Workers then install the gear motor that powers the back and forth movement of the blade. They secure it to the carriage with several bolts. Two more gear motors will drive the cutting chain on the sprockets and will also rotate the blade. The team mounts it to the front of the carriage, just right of the other gear motor. At the back of the carriage now, a worker assembles a gear known as a pinion to a shaft. The pinion engages with a track known as the rack. This rack and pinion system will make the carriage slide back and forth. A worker folds hydraulic hoses in a long metal cage against the front of the machine. He bolts the end of the cage to it. He then connects the hoses to the motor for the cutting chain and protects the connections with metal half flanges. They make all the electrical connections and screw fireproof and waterproof covers onto the boxes to enclose the electronics. They program the chainsaw machine's operator screen. Stay tuned, because the big blade is next. As an employee supervises, a computer-driven plasma flame cuts a very substantial blade from a sheet of high-carbon steel. The blade is long, thick, and it weighs a hefty 600 kilograms. Using a crane with a powerful magnet, they transfer the chainsaw blade to a milling station. Here, computerized tools with tungsten carbide inserts smooth out any roughness in the steel. They also bring the blade to the right thickness and carve channels for lubrication tubes. They drill holes for metal plates that align the cutting chain. After painting the saw and adding an attachment bar, the team mounts it to the front of the chainsaw machine. They slide the bar into the blade support on the front. It's a critical connection because it will bear the load of the heavy blade as it saws through stone. They bolt it to the blade support and secure it with a thick pin and a nut. Next up is the cutting chain sprocket. To create it, a computer-guided tool carves tooth-like projections around the rim of a steel disc. These teeth are designed to engage the links of the cutting chain. The sprocket disc is ready to be mounted to the chainsaw machine. An employee slides it onto the shaft protruding from the cutting chain gear motor. He bolts the disc to the surrounding hub. Next, they assemble the cutting chain. A two-part fastener system will hold the links together, beginning with this hollow pin. Using a hydraulic press, a worker drives the hollow pin into a hole in the links. He inserts an L-shaped pin into the hollow one. The tongue of the L-shaped pin fits into a groove adjacent to the hollow pin. The press forces the L-shaped pin into the other pin and the groove. Using the fasteners, he alternates outer links and inner ones that will fit to the saw body. He builds a 9-meter-long chain, which the next worker loops around the saw blade and sprocket. The chain fits perfectly to the saw. He joins the ends of the chain with a hollow pin and an L-shaped pin to complete the loop. He flattens them with a hammer instead of a press this time. It's simply easier at this angle. The chain is in place, but it doesn't yet have the teeth needed to cut stone. These next parts will give the blade its cutting edge, a carrier and a tungsten carbide cutting bit. He places one of these cutting combos on each of the chain's outer links. He then screws them to the links. Studded with tough, sharp teeth, this mega chainsaw is now ready for rock-cutting action. It cuts most kinds of stone cleanly and efficiently. Its size and bite will make it a force to be reckoned with underground. And despite its bulk, this stone-cutting blade has a full range of movement. Here, the front carriage rotates the blade to demonstrate how it can be repositioned between cuts. And no matter how you slice it, that's pretty impressive.